Everybody in Texas know what the play is. If you rapping, you celebrity, if you like the strip club, you like to do this, you check in with them, they bringing them bad dice on you. Why you think they Duke the jeweler, they really couldn't get him? That's why they had, come on, homie.
I know people were associating me with that Duke the jeweler situation because I went to the Boosie pool party and he happened to be there and he happened to be standing on me.
Boosie Badazz has always been a street-certified rapper, one of the last voices people point to when they talk about keeping it real. But right now, his name is caught in one of the ugliest rumors of his career, that he cut a federal plea deal that could put him at odds with some of the most feared names in Houston, the so-called mob ties empire. If these whispers are true, it's not just a rap beef anymore. It's a storyline that could shake the whole industry. The drama started back in 2023 when Boosie caught a federal gun case. For months, he was fighting it hard, claiming he was being targeted unfairly. But then reports came out that Boosie agreed to some kind of cooperation with the feds, the kind of move that, in street culture, gets you branded as a snitch. Now, nobody's pulled out official paperwork yet, but the way the story's spreading, fans and insiders are convinced Boosie might be giving up names to save himself. And the names being whispered? None other than JPrince and JPrince Jr., the faces of Houston's underground check-in culture and the mob ties brand. Here's why that's a big deal. The feds have been circling mob ties for years. Houston's reputation for mandatory check-ins whenever rappers visit isn't just street myth. Multiple artists and industry figures have said straight up that you can't move through that city without going through the princes. From dice games to clubs, mob ties has always had influence. And that influence has been under scrutiny ever since the murder of Duke the jeweler in 2022. Duke, a well-known Chicago jeweler, was killed in Houston right after winning big at a dice game tied to Boosie's circle. The story goes he flashed his winnings, left the game, and got gunned down in the parking lot. His jewelry and his Louis Vuitton bag were later linked back to people close to Boosie. That alone had fans side-eyeing him. But now with the plea deal rumors, people are saying Boosie might be giving the feds details about that whole night. And who else was involved? It gets deeper. Word is the feds believe Boosie's own nephew could have been the shooter in Duke's case. Instead of charging it as a local murder, they spun it into a federal murder probe, which means way more pressure, way more resources, and way more room for deals. If Boosie's nephew gets jammed up, the feds know the only way Boosie protects him is by trading information. And the people at the top of that list? Mob ties. That's why this story is catching so much heat. If Boosie really is cooperating, then JPrince Jr., who was already standing in the crosshairs after Takeoff's murder at another Houston dice game, might be the next domino to fall. People been saying for a while that mob ties runs those games like traps, where rappers either lose money, get robbed, or worse. Add in Takeoff's death under JPrince Jr.'s watch, and the pattern looks ugly. Now the feds might finally be piecing it all together with Boosie's help. For fans, it's a betrayal. Boosie has been one of the loudest critics of snitch culture, calling out Tekashi 6 and 9 and anybody else who cooperated with the feds. To hear that he might be doing the same thing? That's why this rumor is blowing up. Whether it's true or not, the perception is already staining his image. And if Mob Ties finds out Boosie's really giving their names to the feds, then we're talking about a situation that could get deadly, not just messy. The case that put Boosie right in the middle of this firestorm is the murder of Duke the jeweler. Duke wasn't just some random guy. He was a respected jeweler from Chicago who worked with rappers, athletes, and street figures across the country. Everywhere he went, he had his signature iced-out pieces, and his reputation was solid. But when he pulled up to Houston in 2022 for a high-stakes dice game tied to Boosie's circle, that's where his story ended. Duke hit big that night. Witnesses said he cleaned the table out, walking away with stacks of cash. In the rap world, winning a dice game in somebody else's city is risky, especially when it's tied to a crew with deep ties like mob ties. After the game, Duke left with his winnings, but he never made it home. Moments later, he was gunned down in the parking lot. His Louis Vuitton bag and his jewelry vanished. The streets didn't need paperwork. They already suspected foul play, and the fact that Duke was last seen around Boosie's people made the suspicion worse. When Boosie went on social media to deny involvement, his explanation raised more eyebrows. He claimed he barely knew Duke and had nothing to do with what happened. But fans remembered Duke had posted on IG just days before the dice game, shouting Boosie out. That contradiction left the internet side-eyeing Boosie hard. Then came the federal angle. Reports started surfacing that the feds had evidence linking Duke's missing jewelry and cash back to people in Boosie's circle. Even more explosive? They believe Boosie's own nephew was directly tied to the shooting. Now, instead of this staying a state-level case in Texas, it got escalated into a federal murder probe. That's a game changer because when the feds step in, they don't just want the shooter, they want the network. This is where Boosie's rumored plea deal starts making sense. If the feds have enough to tie his nephew to Duke's murder, that's a life sentence on the table. But if Boosie cooperates, giving them names higher up the chain, like who runs the dice games, who sets up the check-ins, and who profits when outsiders lose, then suddenly his nephew might get some leniency. And in the streets, that's the classic setup. Trade information to protect family. The target of that information? JPrince Jr. and mob ties. People online been saying for years that mob ties dice games aren't fair. Rappers pull up thinking it's friendly gambling, but end up getting lined up. Some walk away broke, some get robbed, and some, like Duke and later Takeoff, don't walk away at all. The pattern is too loud to ignore, and the feds know it. Duke's death, especially with Boosie's people possibly tied to it, gave them the opening they needed to dig deeper. Now add Boosie's gun case into the mix. He was already facing years behind bars if the feds wanted to throw the book at him. Suddenly, the rumor of a plea deal makes sense. Instead of going down alone, Boosie allegedly agreed to work with investigators. And if that's true, it means every detail he knows about Houston dice games, mob ties connections, and who really benefits from those setups is now in the hands of the government. For the culture, this is where things get complicated. On one hand, people want justice for Duke, a man who didn't deserve to die after a simple dice game. On the other, if Boosie really gave up names to the feds, he'll never be seen the same in the streets. He spent years branding himself as anti-snitch, the one calling out Tekashi, 6 at 9 and E, and anyone who folded under federal pressure. But if he just did the same thing to save himself and his nephew, then Boosie's street credibility might be gone forever. When you bring up mob ties, you can't ignore what happened to Takeoff in late 2022. The Migos star lost his life in Houston, shot outside a bowling alley during, you guessed it, another mob ties connected dice game. Just like with Duke the jeweler, people instantly questioned why these high-stakes games always seem to end in blood. And once again, JPrince Jr. was right there in the middle of it. The narrative looked way too familiar. Rappers come to Houston, they check in, they're told they're under mob ties protection. They hit the dice games thinking it's all fun and brotherhood. Then, somebody ends up robbed, lined up, or killed. Takeoff wasn't even the one gambling. He was just in the mix when Quavo got into an argument. But bullets don't care who they hit. And when fans saw the video of JPrince Jr. casually walking past Takeoff's body after the shooting, the internet exploded. This wasn't just another random tragedy. To people in the culture, it was confirmation that mob ties events aren't safe. They look like setups. That's why street voices like Whack 100 and Charleston White have been going off, accusing mob ties of running traps. Whack said flat out that Houston ain't no check-in, it's a stick-up. Charleston called mob ties nothing but extortion with jewelry and dice. And whether you love or hate those two, their words hit because they echo what the streets were already thinking. So when Duke the jeweler got killed at a dice game tied to Boosie, and Takeoff lost his life months later at another dice game under JPrince Jr.'s watch, the dots started connecting. Fans said, how many times does this gotta happen before y'all admit the pattern? And that's exactly what the feds are now looking at. They see mob ties as more than just a clique. They see it as a network. And Boosie's rumored plea deal makes things worse for them. If the feds already suspected mob ties of controlling these dice games and taxing rappers with their check-in culture, then Boosie spilling inside info is like gasoline on the fire. Think about it. He's been in the rooms. He knows how these games get set up. He knows who really controls the money flow. If he's telling the feds what everybody's been whispering for years, then JPrince Sr. and Jr. might finally be facing real heat. not just internet criticism. The streets already know the reputation. Rappers have admitted privately that going to Houston comes with rules. If you don't check in, you're a target. If you do check in, you're still at risk. Either way, mob ties profits. Some say it's protection, others call it extortion, but the end result is the same. Rappers leave lighter than they came. And the Takeoff tragedy was the ultimate proof that protection doesn't guarantee safety. Now with federal eyes on everything, mob ties can't move the way they used to. Artists and labels are allegedly avoiding Houston shows tied to them, scared of both violence and federal heat. The days of dice games with millions in cash sitting on the table might be numbered. And Boosie, by accident or by deal, may have handed the feds the blueprint they needed to make that happen. But here's the twist. If Boosie really is cooperating, then he just crossed a line he can't uncross. The feds might love him for now, but the streets won't. In a culture where snitching is the ultimate crime, Boosie's credibility would be shattered. And mob ties? They're not just gonna shrug it off. If their name ends up in federal paperwork because of him, then Boosie might have more to worry about than just his freedom. Right now, all the whispers point to one thing. The feds are circling mob ties. Boosie's plea deal rumors may have been the spark, but the fire has been burning for a while. Duke the Jeweler's murder, Takeoff's death, and decades of Houston's check-in culture all gave investigators enough to finally step in. And unlike local police, the feds don't play. They don't care about street codes. They don't care about reputation. They care about building a case big enough to take down the whole tree, not just a few branches. If you've been paying attention, this has the same energy as past federal takedowns in hip-hop. Think of Murder Inc. in the early 2000s when the feds tried to tie Irv Gotti to drug money. Think of Suge Knight in Death Row when their violence caught government eyes. Once federal task forces start digging, they don't stop until either they find something or they force everyone to spend millions trying to fight them in court. And with mob ties, the dice games, the robberies, the extortion whispers, there's too much smoke for them not to find fire. The role Boosie plays in this storm is what makes the streets tense. If he really cut a deal to save himself and his nephew, then mob ties might already be compromised. Boosie's been in those dice rooms, he's seen how things move, and if he's handing the feds inside details, that's deadly information. The same rapper who spent years calling Tekashi 669 and a rat might end up wearing that same label. And that irony ain't lost on fans. For JPrince Sr. and Jr., the stakes are higher than ever. JPrince has always moved like a godfather figure in Houston, respected for decades, known for both music and muscle. But lately, that image is cracking. After Takeoff's murder, fans didn't see a protector. They saw someone whose name keeps popping up around bloodshed. And now with Duke the Jeweler tied back to Boosie, plus rumors of Boosie cooperating, JPrince's mob ties brand is looking less like respect and more like liability. And this ain't just about street credibility. If mob ties gets hit with indictments, Houston's whole music scene could shift. For years, rappers treated Houston like a required stop, a city you had to show love to, and a place you had to check in. If the feds tear that down, artists might stop moving through Houston the same way. The mob ties protection that once looked like a blessing now looks like a trap. And when that perception shifts, so does the power. Meanwhile, fans are divided on Boosie. Some say if he's really helping the feds, he betrayed everything he stood for. Others argue he's just trying to protect his family, and that Duke's murder was too big to ignore anyway. But one thing's for sure, if paperwork comes out with his name on it, his career as the street's voice might be done. He can still make music, but that respect he built for decades? Gone. The irony in all this is that Boosie and mob ties were supposed to represent the last of that real street energy in hip-hop. Instead, their names are now tied to federal indictments, rumors of snitching, and the deaths of Duke and Takeoff. What was once power now looks like downfall. At the end of the day, this isn't just about Boosie or JPrince or even mob ties. It's about a culture where dice games, extortion, and silence always seemed normal, until the feds decided it was time to break it up. And when the feds move in, nobody's untouchable, not even legends.